Hi, I'm Tanner Hayes, and my new student dialogue was about higher education, whether or not it's a right or a privilege. Um, in our dialogue, we had multiple active voices. I was one of the active voices. There was another kid named Luke who had an active voice, and that just meant that we participated strongly talking about different viewpoints that we had about the subject, and then there were a lot of passive voices in our dialogue. Most of the people in the dialogue were passive voices, which made for a pretty boring dialogue because there weren't a lot of people talking until around the end of the dialogue. Anyway, our dialogue was about, like I said, higher education and whether or not it's a right or a privilege. And a lot of people agreed that there are people who don't have the same opportunity for education as we at Clemson do, or as other lucky individuals do. Um, but we watched a video about kids on the corridor of shame in South Carolina, where the education is subpar, and we all saw that the high schools there were a lot worse off than most of our high schools. There were some people that said that their high schools were similar and that it was harder for them to get to college. Me, as well as many others, talked about how their high schools were very good in helping them get to college and then helping them through the whole academic process. For example, my high school had counselors that would help you prepare for college and help you see where you wanted to go to college, or even if you weren't going to college, help you find a job in the workforce, or whatever the next step in your life is, they would help you. But a lot of high schools didn't have that, as we found out. Especially on the quarter of shame, but even other students in our dialogue had high schools that weren't as nice. And then some students talked about high schools that had qualities that were much, much better than even mine, even coming from North Fulton, Atlanta, in Georgia, where my high school was very good. There are other high schools that have for example, indoor swimming pools, big gyms, and new technologies that help them teach, a lot like Clemson has. And so we got to examine differences between those educational institutions, and we discussed that a lot. That was a lot of the active voices. Let's see. And then whether it was a right or a privilege, we said that unfortunately a lot of people don't have the same educational opportunities growing up, and it's not necessarily their fault. Sometimes they're just born into it. We talked about the fact that school districts that don't have very good education tend not to get as much money because those areas aren't as developed, and it comes from property taxes as the money that goes towards education. So areas that are poorer, where there's not as much money being made, will have less education, and it's kind of a catch-22 spiral where the places that have worse education tend to produce people who are not as educated, and therefore can't make as much money. So it's really hard to get ahead in places like this. There are programs like one in Atlanta that bus overachieving students from lower class areas to higher class areas, such as where my school is, so that they can receive a better education. But other than that, it's really hard to get out of an area like that, because it's hard to go to college if you don't have a good education and I'm just staying in this place where you were poorly educated and your kids end up going to the same school. So it's really a hard situation to get out of. On the other hand, really more expensive areas or higher class areas have better schools because the property is more expensive, and therefore higher class people tend to get a better education than lower class people. So that's a lot of what we talked about. We also played a game with fake money, and it made us we were assigned whether we were lower class or higher class, and we had to see if we could go to college or where we could go to college for how long with just the money we had. And in the lower class, we didn't have much money, so we weren't able to graduate even from a 2-year school. And then the higher class was able to graduate from a really good school because they had a lot more money to spend. And so that shows a difference in just the ability to even pay for a higher education. So in conclusion, higher education is not, we don't all get it, so it wouldn't necessarily be a right, but it's more of a privilege, because there's a privileged few who get a higher education, while many have to deal with lower education, and therefore they don't excel as much in life.